Afternoon, everyone. Looking around, there's some friendly faces here I recognise. So I'll give you a quick introduction if you don't know me. I'm Mike Younger. I'm a chartered engineer in mechanical engineering. Got my chartership through the ACOSD. If you are project controls with an accredited degree, I recommend you look into that. I live in Surrey. 2 years ago, I was on this stage talking about earned value management and how it can be used to better forecast. This year is a slightly different subject. I've got 37 plus years experience in oil and gas contracting, and I've recently joined Turner & Townsend as a management consultant in project controls. So basically my role is to help clients set up new contracts in a project controls friendly manner, to audit existing projects to make sure they're doing what they said they were going to do, and unfortunately every now and then go into a disaster zone, find out what went wrong, and help the client rebuild the project. And I've found, since joining Turner & Townsend, working on mines, pharmaceutical, rail, airports, and more recently nuclear power, what we do in project controls is very transferable. The same problems with budgets, schedules, occur in all sectors. And what I've discovered since working for Turner & Townsend has led me to this presentation. So the topic. We all take it for granted nowadays that every project that's a real size project has a schedule. But I think the next great challenge is to realise that we should put all our schedules together into one big portfolio rather than deal with projects separately. So this presentation is to explain why and how to do this. Now I showed this presentation to a colleague who said to me, okay, all projects do have schedules, but surely the next big challenge is to get project managers to use them. Oh dear, there's room for the project managers. Okay, but I think the next big challenge is to put them together. So here's the agenda. We're going to look at what portfolio management is, how to set them up, the benefits of having them, and how they work together. And then the second section is on coding, on how the codes that we put into our portfolio will help us get the right results from the portfolio. So if you just help me by a show of hands, how many people have heard of portfolio schedule management? And it's very good. And how many people have actually used it now or in the past? Okay, that's pretty good. So there's a few people here who might be able to help me out if I get stuck. And there's a few people hearing this for the first time, which is always good. And at the end, there will be questions. We're told not to take questions through the presentation, but there's something that's really burning up in your head and you want to ask the question. If I can answer it, please put your hand up. And if I can't, we'll put it to the end of the presentation. So, this is the PMI definition of a portfolio. I just love, if you just read that to yourself just for a second while I talk, I just love the PMI and how they make things so simple appear so complicated and so daunting. I think it just bigs up PMI that if you can understand that, you must be a really intelligent guy. I think it's a lot easier. It's basically putting all your schedules together into one portfolio so you can see the effect one project has on another in terms of resources, in terms of cost, in terms of data transfer. And also, you can then have better resource planning. And you have fewer surprises, and you can also plan in advance which projects you're going to sanction to go forward. So we're going to look now at some of the benefits and features of a portfolio that make it worthwhile creating one in the first place. So if you have a portfolio, you can see all your projects together on one page and understand the effect they have on each other. You can then prioritize which projects are more important. So if you have a shortfall in money or resources, you can decide where to send those resources, which gives you better resource planning, improved reporting. Suddenly all your reports are coming out in the same manner. So the senior managers in the company get to understand what they're looking at. And because all your projects are in one place together, you can then benchmark them against each other. Compare project A with project B and project B with project C because they're all in the same place. You don't have to go hunting to try and find files in cabinets. or emails that were sent a while ago. They're all in the same place. So the first thing we're going to talk about is gate control. How many people have heard of gate control on projects? Okay, good. So the general rule is projects should not start until all 4 of these criteria have been met. You have the money for the project. You have a schedule that proves the project can be delivered. You have the resources to deliver the project, and someone's read the instructions before you start. Because the IKEA principle kicks in a lot. So another show of hands, sorry about this, but I like to make it more interactive. How many people start building the flat pack wardrobe before they read the instructions? Okay, how many people actually read the instructions first? Yeah, as I'd expect with project controls people more. And how many people don't actually build wardrobes because they're project controls people? They watch their partner do it and then criticize it. Yes, that's the bigger group. So, gates should only be open to allow projects to start when all 4 of these are in place for each phase. In my experience, the projects that go wrong because they start with only 3 of these in place. Okay, we've got the schedule, we've got people, and we know what we're going to do. Okay, we can't do it for the cost the client wants, but hey, once we start, we're going to be really clever and make up new ways to cut costs. Doesn't happen. Or, we've got the money, we've got the people, we know what we're going to do, but we can't do it in the time the client wants. So let's just innovate as we go along. Let's make this a fast-track project. Now, in 30 years plus, I've only worked on one fast-track project that was a success, and that was the Bahrain Grand Prix track, because that was a fast track. All the rest failed, because you cannot deliver with only 3 of those. I even visited the client a while back that started a project with only 2 of those. I've got some money and I've got some people sat around. So let's think up a project while we're at it. Come up with an idea and then build a schedule. Needless to say, that was a huge disaster. So make sure you have all 4 of those in place before you start. And once you know what you need to have, you can set your gates up in your portfolio. Now, a lot of people say gate reviews. That's a lot of time and effort to produce lots of bits of paper to prove the project's going to work. But 99 times out of 100, they save time in your project, because before you start, you read the instructions and you have everything you need. I'll give you a good example of that. Last year, one of our clients in the north of England asked me to go up there and review his scheduling department. Project after project was going late against the schedule. So he wanted to know, do I have a problem with my planning department? Do I have the wrong benchmarks? Or is my construction team inefficient? So I went up there and I spent a couple of weeks looking at his schedules, reviewing the benchmarks, and I found there was nothing wrong with the schedules. They were all viable, they were all logically linked. They had the right resources linked to them. So I went out in the field and spoke to the project managers. I said, can you tell me why the projects are going late? And time after time, it was because they didn't have the resources they needed. Project manager A was expecting 5 pipe fitters to come from project B. Unbeknownst to him, project B was running 3 months late. So his pipe fitters didn't arrive. Because his pipe fitters hadn't arrived, his electricians were sitting around doing nothing, and they were required by project manager C. So because nobody was talking to anyone else, no one knew that these projects were being delayed. So the reason his projects were going late was because he was starting them too early. Simple as that. If he'd waited until the resources were in place, he could have met his schedule. So if we've got portfolios, we can look at lead indicators. We can look at, are we ready to go? Do we have the right price? Do we have the right schedule? And do we have the right resources? Now, if you haven't got a portfolio, this is kind of down to an opinion. But if you've got other projects already in the portfolio, you can check whether the price looks right. You can benchmark it against other projects. You can review common activities to see if the duration is correct. And you can also make sure the resources are available because you know where everyone in your team is at any one moment. and when they're becoming available for your team. And then you've got the lag indicators. Once your project started, you can look at the CPI and the SPI to date across all your portfolios. And you can say, all my projects are operating at 1, apart from this one project that's at 0.8. And you can go to that project and find out what's going on. And if necessary, you can move people from high-performing projects to that project to help it out. And you can also look at the TCPI and the TSPI, which for those of you who don't know is the performance index to go, cost and schedule. Now, if that project's been at 0.8 and they're telling you they can get to 1.2 to finish, you can ask yourself, is that realistic? Because you can look at your portfolios and the resources he has and make a decision if his forecast is overly optimistic, or indeed he can make 1.2, because you can review his team and his performance against the rest of the plant. And finally, you can look at average rates. If at the top here you were looking at maybe pulling 10 meters an hour and you're only pulling 5 meters of cable an hour, you can ask the question, why is that project underperforming against its plan? And you'll get various answers, but with a portfolio, you can ask the other projects what they're pulling cable at. If all the others are doing it at 5, maybe your benchmark is wrong. But if your average rates start to deviate from your as-bid, you can step in very early on. So how do we put them into a portfolio plan? This is where I get the biggest pushback from clients. They say, Mike, if you put all of my projects into one schedule, you're going to create a monster. We're looking at hundreds of thousands of activities. It's going to get so complicated, it's going to be like a bowl of spaghetti. But nowadays, P6 and other planning systems allow you to put all your schedules in one node, but not one schedule. So what we're talking about here is putting all the projects in a node individually, so you can look at them individually, but you can also open them together to get an overall picture. So you are having hundreds of thousands of activities, but they're not all in the same schedule. You can link those schedules where there's interdependencies. You can hard link them, or you can put give-get milestones so that one project isn't affected by another until it becomes late. But that's up to you, because you put them in. And the other thing to remember is you don't put them all in detail. You put in 10 to 15 lines for each of your projects that takes you through pre-sanction, design, procure, construct and commission. 10 to 15 lines for each project is enough. And against each of those lines, you put dates in and costs and resources required. So this client in the north of England with 160 projects, we were able to model his entire 2016 business plan in 2,000 activities. So once he had that, he could look at all his resources and all the gates required. So it doesn't take much work to do that, because most project managers can tell you an overall envelope schedule, and most estimators can give you an upfront price. So now you've got all your projects in one portfolio. You also need to put in your prospects, because that's work that may come in. And if you want the entire business, you need to put your overhead people in as well. So you need to have dummy bars for the accounts department, sales department. Dummy as in, oh, no, I won't go there. Okay. So obviously you cannot run a project with just 10 to 15 activities. So before you start, you need to have an interactive planning session and produce a level 2, level 3 schedule with a lot more bars in it. You can then review that against the business plan and at a very high level explain why the project is longer, shorter, more expensive, cheaper than you said it was going to be. And only when the project's sanctioned do you drop all that detail into your portfolio. You keep it off to one side because it's just going to muddy the waters. You put it into the portfolio when it's sanctioned, make sure it's still connected up with its interdependencies, and then obviously you continue to schedule or update or progress your schedules. That still goes on. There is an added complication that you have to make sure your projects update in the same cycle, but it's not impossible in P6 to do that. And now you have your normal critical path on each project. but you now have the added benefit of an overall critical path across your business. So the example I gave you earlier, the project manager on project A would have known the pipe fitters weren't available for 3 more months. So his activity with 3 months float suddenly becomes critical. So 3 months ahead of time, he can decide to take on more pipe fitters or delay the pipe fitting activity. He can release his electricians to project C, and therefore the impact is seen across a total critical path. Unless you join up your projects, you're never going to get a total critical path. Once you've got all your projects joined up, you can look at your resources across the whole organisation. You can see dips in requirements that you need to fill by taking on more projects, or maybe delaying projects or accelerating projects. And you can see bursts and say, well, I'm sorry, I can't do that project for you in April. I'm going to have to move it to June because there's no way I can do that in the time you require with the people I have. Also, some of our clients have funding issues. They can only afford to spend X million a month. So by having a portfolio, you can say you're going to overspend in 6 months' time if you take on the level of work you currently have. So you should look to move some of your projects out, or at least be on alert that 2 months down the line you may have to move them. This isn't available if you don't have a portfolio. It's down to guesswork and who you meet in the coffee shop. So, you can also schedule your gate meetings. This was once again the project in the north of England. These show the values on the bars of the money to be funded in that period at gate reviews. And you can see there are 3 distinct peaks. So that's when we said ahead of the time to the board members, you're going to have to be in this city in the north of England to sanction those projects, because those are the 3 big months. You can take a bit of a break around Easter, but you've got to put in your diaries now meetings in February, August and November, or we won't meet the gates. So that allows you to look ahead to gate sanctions. And then you can use a 90-day look ahead across your entire business. So in your publications and on your notice boards, you can put the milestones coming up on all the projects. This allows people to know why their colleagues on other projects are looking really stressed and can't go to the pub with them. But it also tells them what's happening. And if that person in the organisation has expertise in that milestone, they can perhaps go visit that project and say, look, I noticed next week you're doing X. I did this 5 years ago for another company. How can I help you? Because you're now having an updated 90-day plan on the wall. So to summarise portfolios, you've got to understand that all your projects and all your programs are linked. Even if that link is just that they're owned by the same company or they use the same people, they are linked in some way. You can report sections of projects, single projects, or the entire portfolio as a whole because they're all together in the same place. You can compare and contrast projects. Why am I getting this job for 100k when all the other projects like it cost 200? What's different, or is the 100 wrong? You can do that up front. And your projects can be progressed via progress reviews on a regular basis, and you know when the gates are coming. And because you have a portfolio, all your projects are using the same processes. So when you move a project person from one to another, he or she doesn't have to learn the systems. All they have to do is learn about the project, because the systems they're going to use on the new project are identical to the one on their old project. You get a lot more staff flexibility. But you cannot have a portfolio unless all the projects are using the same coding structure. Every single project has to use the same coding structure or they can't talk to each other. So the second part of the talk is on coding in terms of portfolio management requirements. So a guy called Rudyard Kipling, I'm sure you must have all heard of him. He wrote Jungle Book and a few great poems. He said, I'll have to get close, I'm getting old now. I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and how and where and who. So if we in project controls know those 6 things about our projects and anything we encounter, we can make informed decisions. Too often, project controls people get stuck with how much and when. They don't have time for questions like wow, why, and who. So this talk, the second part, is to explain how we can use codes to inform us of these 6. So let's look at these 6 in terms of project controls. The what is the cost breakdown structure. That tells us what an item is. Why is the business case. Now, we in project controls don't get involved enough in helping management with business cases. If we had portfolios, we could come to the table and say, here's previous projects, this is how they developed, and this is why this project can be a success. So if we have portfolios, we can help more in the why. The when is obviously the schedule. The how are the procedures and the execution plan. Now, time after time, I come across projects that are writing new procedures. Every new project seems to want to have a new set of procedures. Surely it's better if all projects have the same procedures with slight twists to suit the client or to suit the location. Don't write them from scratch. Execution plans are really weighty documents. Why start them all from scratch? Why not look at your portfolio, find a similar project that you've done, and start with that execution plan and what went on in that project as your starting point. Build on their success, learn from their failures. You can do that with a portfolio. Where is the work breakdown structure? And we'll talk a bit more about this, but a lot of people get hung up on WBSs being everything. It's just where something is. And finally, who? This is your organisation breakdown structure that says which contractor's working on it, and also your responsibility assignment matrix. So who in your organisation is looking after that element? So if we know all 6 of them, we basically know everything about anything. Because we look at that object and we know exactly what it is. So let's now expand on the 4 main ones up there to do with project controls. The CBS, the cost breakdown structure. This is generally the most mature code across most organisations because the accounts department demand that all components have got the same code and everyone obeys the same accounting rules. Because accountants basically rule the planet at the moment. They're the ones that get their way, but we in project controls can use that information because the codes in the account system help us to tell the difference between apples and pears, bananas and pineapples. It tells us where that component is in terms of the final asset register. So for tax reasons and for planning of the operations, you can start to build the asset register very early on. It also tells you if that component has been used somewhere else. So if you want the price for a pump, you can search the portfolio to find if that pump has ever been bought before in your organisation. And if it hasn't, maybe you can search for similar codes and then factor the price. But you're not going through filing cabinets, you're just pressing a button. And finally for me, it tells me what the rules of credit are for earned value. If you link your earned value, rules of credit, to the CBS, you're always going to earn credits and progress in a consistent manner. So the schedule, pretty obvious, it's when. It tells me when things have to be done and what we need to do next. It allows you to plan your resources. If you resource load your schedule, you know when you're going to need people. And it helps generate the cash flow. Too often I come across projects where the cash flow is generated by cost control, not talking to planning. You ask, why is that cost being spent next year? Because it's needed, but the schedule says it's not needed to the year after. Do you not even speak to the planning department? No, because they've got different data to us. That's not acceptable, it can't go on. And as Benjamin Franklin says, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. The where. This is the work breakdown structure and tells you where something is. This is where most of the confusion I come across happens. because people start putting what's and who's into a work breakdown structure. For me, it shouldn't be in the work breakdown structure until you can actually physically go visit it. If it's not a place, it's not a WBS. It's probably a CBS or an OBS. Now, obviously, locations on projects are project specific, but if you call your boiler room the same code on every single project, you can then start to have a portfolio of boiler room schedules and boiler room prices. So I think it's important to try and have common codes in the WBS. And don't be afraid to start high and expand as you go. This one here, it's very tempting to have a code for every room and then start building your budget at that level. You don't need to. You're probably just happy having external building, internal building costs. And then as time goes on, you can break that into sectors, floors, and then rooms. But if you try and code your budget too early, you'll just tie yourself up in knots. So the OBS is who. So we need to know who's responsible for each part of the project. So if we have an OBS against every activity, when we come to do a similar project, we can look at the contractors we used. And we can refine our bidders list to only the contractors that worked on that project well in the past. And you also need to have another who, which is the responsibility assignment matrix. So if you see an activity and you want to know what's going on, you know to go and ask in your organisation. And it also helps you decide who gets what report. So what level should you pitch them at? Codes don't have to be logical, but those that are work best. If your control room is CR, people get to know CR is the control room. It could just as easily be 112X/V71, because computers deal with that. But I think it's much better if your codes are logical so people can start to guess them. Once again, don't start low, go in high and then define your codes as you go. But beware that there is a point where the more codes you add, the least accuracy you get. So when someone says to me, I want a code, Mike, I ask them, does it fit one of 4 criteria? Can I get an actual cost for it? Or is it merged in another element? Can I see at least one activity on the schedule for that code? Can I see and measure the quantities in terms of drawings, meters of cable, cubic meters of concrete? If I can't see those, then I have a problem. And finally, can I get a progress number for it? Is someone responsible for it? If it doesn't meet those 4 criteria, you can't report it. So what's the point of having it? So ask yourself that before you create. Because the more codes you create, the more likely you are to create a monster. You end up being a coding machine, not a project controls person. So how do we combine them? We make sure every single component has a CBS and a WBS. And that combination is called a control account. And we make sure there's at least one activity in the schedule for every control account. And then we resource load the schedule, see if the project's viable. So I like to think of a control account as being a cube with 3 dimensions. It tells me where it is, what it is, and who's responsible. Only when I know those 3 things can I control that control account. So what I do at the start is I create a matrix. I put the WBS's, the wheres along the top, and the CBS's, the what's down the side. And then I overlay the budget into each one of the boxes. So here we can see the budget for project management in feedstock is 1, contingency in that area is 1. The black boxes tell me that that intersection doesn't exist. There is no project management. There are no bulk materials in the feedstock, and there's no construction in the water because it's coming as a module. But when I see there's no budget in there, it makes me check to find out why there is no budget in that intersection. And also there's an added bonus. If we add it across, we get the budget per commodity, and if we add it down, we get the budget per area instantly. And if we come across something we can't fit into the matrix, then we have to add new codes or question why it's there. Then we develop the contracting plan. And what we do is we colour in the boxes that belong to different contractors. So you can see along the middle, there is one company supplying the equipment across those areas. There's another company doing office work and another one doing some construction. Just by colouring that in, we realise who's responsible for every box. And if we add up the values in the same coloured boxes, we instantly get the budget for that contractor. So if you come across the point where you need more than one contractor, then you need to add colours to the chart. You need to increase the CBS or the WBS to reflect the contracting strategy. And as you go on, this colour chart becomes more and more granular until you reach the point where every single cost element is a box with a colour. You can then combine by contractor, by commodity, and by area. And because all your four main systems are using the same coding structure, they can all talk to each other. Accounts, estimating, schedule, and the budget have all got the same code. And because they've all got the same code, there's no translation involved. So you can get the single source of truth. You can get dashboards, schedules, earned value metrics, and graphs, cash flows, cost reports, all from the same system. Now, I'm sure today you're going to hear loads of companies saying their system's the best. But if you've got all the codes, you don't need to worry about the system because any system on the market will do that for you. It's when you don't have the codes and you have to do extensive translation that the ecosystems, Prisms, Cobras of the world start to cost a lot of money. And there's one more thing here. I put the single source of the truth. It's up to you to decide if it's true or not. That's what project controls is about. It's actually a single source of data. If anyone says to you, single source of the truth, question how they know it's the truth. It's just a consistent set of data. But what it means is if you don't like the data and you interrogate any of the systems, you're going to get the same consistent answer. You're not going to get an optimistic planning report and a pessimistic cost report because they all come from the same source. So, there is a big pitfall with the codes. If projects or contractors don't use them properly, the whole system falls to pieces. So you need to enforce the use of codes in your contracts and in your company. And if they won't comply with the codes, then perhaps they shouldn't be on the bidders list. But you in turn have to make sure your codes are up to date. So don't be afraid to add new codes if new events happen. But I would say if you add a new code, try and make it linked to the original code so the historical records still work. Because if you start changing all your codes, your history's gone. And you need to go up front, make sure everyone agrees the codes because everyone owns them. If you don't agree them up front at the start of the project, you're going to have to do cost reallocations, translations. And instead of being project controls people, you're just going to be coding guys. You're going to be trying to work the Enigma machine rather than work the project controls machine. Some other codes I've not covered, but I think they're important to mention. A lot of companies use a PBS so that they know what phase the project's in. Is it in design? Is it in construction? Is it in commissioning? The FBS is key if your company is funded by more than one entity or your projects are joint ventures. This tells you who's paying for what in the budget. So you add this code to the budget and you know which entity is responsible for which cost. And then you can report his costs to him and show him just his schedule because you've got an FBS in your system. Currency codes. If your account system isn't mature enough to deal with currencies, you need to put it as a code in your cost system so you can spot the dollars from the yen from the pounds. And finally, the SBS. This is a key one. Because somewhere around about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through your project, you're going to have to move from zonal construction to system construction so that you can do commissioning. So the earlier you put the SBS into your structure, the earlier you can start to produce commissioning schedules, commissioning budgets, and get people buying into the commissioning strategy. But then, of course, you can add other codes that are specific to your organisation or your industry, but don't create a monster. More codes are not always the right thing. But to summarise, codes are never a one-size-fits-all. You have to make sure they fit the project, and if they don't, revise them. If you've got the same codes, you can get systems to talk. So you put your schedule on top of your cost system, you automatically get a cash flow. Seems pretty simple, but a lot of people miss that one. It gives you a formwork to decide which projects go ahead, and it gives you the single source of the truth. And it leads to better understanding, comparison and benchmarking of your projects, because all the projects can be looked at in the same way because they're all speaking the same language. So, overall summary. Your project managers and your teams think all their projects are unique and special, but they're not really. They're all part of a bigger picture. So they need to be put together so that everyone can see the whole picture. Sometimes it's better not to start something unless you can finish it. So have gate controls, think about what you're going to need to do, link your projects so that you know the resources are available to do your project, and if they're not, when they are going to be available. Portfolios lead to greater standardisation. Greater standardisation leads to more mobility of your staff. You can move from office to office, country to country, and all you've got to do is learn the project, not the system. But they only work if you use the same codes. So spend a lot of time up front of the project making sure the codes are robust enough to execute the project through all the phases. Thank you very much. Has anyone got any questions? Everybody
Mike.
needs a mic.
Oh, we all need a mic. What you've actually basically said is that your project controls should operate exactly the same way as your general ledger,
Yes.
in so much as the management, the numbers come out the GL, every project in one system, and you've just said exactly, project controls works like GL.
Yeah,
I can't see why you would ever get any resistance if it's explained that way to your management.
I think that's exactly it. And when you explain it in that manner, people start to see it. But there is a tendency for project managers to see their project as so special that they need to have their own special codes and their own special schedule. To get them to realise that their project isn't special is the hardest selling point.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Because they do accept all the financial information in all the same format throughout
Whatever
the
it
company.
says, if accounts say it's 1 million, it must be 1 million.
Yeah, good presentation.
Thank you very much.
It's okay.